We begin with Livan starting another workday. As he opens the gates to the construction site, he immediately gathers with his entire team and ends up receiving a gift from one of his assistants, who came to bring him a meal cooked by his wife. Even though Livan tries to refuse it so as not to take advantage of the man's goodwill, the worker assures him that the meal was made with love by his wife. After this kind gesture, Livan forms a circle with his helpers and assures them that today will be a busy day. They need to dismantle and assemble scaffolding and make sure all inspections go smoothly. So there won't be any shortage of work for any of them. Still, everyone is motivated to get things done, giving it their all. As they work, Livan heads to the office of the family-run construction company, Garcia, which is managed by Joey, Carla, and their daughter Jane. The trio is also working hard, to the point that the young woman complains she is not even being paid to help. Hearing this, Joey pulls out the classic dad card, saying he won't pay her because he already supports her financially. So yeah, folks, maybe avoid working with family, right? Just a little tip. Jokes aside, we see Carla doing everything she can to pressure their suppliers for updates, while Jane shows the mid-year financial report to her dad. When he sees the amount of money involved, he's visibly shocked, practically with dollar signs in his eyes. Meanwhile, Livan returns to supervising his crew, but from afar, he notices a shady group of men approaching. He soon realizes that the thugs are ambushing the assistant who gave him the food earlier. Before the beating continues, the contractor approaches calmly with a bucket and surprises the idiots by throwing hundreds of nails at them. Even though the thugs try to fight back, Livan shows impressive martial skill. He not only defends himself, but also counterattacks with ease. When the rest of the gang shows up to help their beaten-up buddies, Livan tears open a bag of cement and throws it at them, using the cloud of dust as a distraction. With that, the situation reaches a standstill, the perfect opening for Livan to arm himself and threaten them. Despite being outnumbered, he manages to scare them off. After helping his injured co-worker, he returns to work, until he's approached by Jenny, who was the only one to witness the beating he gave the thugs. She's surprised and mentions that her grandfather also served in the military, which is how she picked up a few things from him. Then, Jenny hands Livan more food made especially for him by her grandmother. Livan, however, makes it clear that she can't tell anyone what she saw. Shortly afterward, he heads to a children's party to pick up his daughter, Mary. The problem is that she's being raised by her grandfather, a man who clearly doesn't like Livan. When R sees him, he doesn't even try to hide his anger that Livan came to get Mary right in the middle of her birthday party. On top of that, the old man considers Livan to be a terrible influence on Mary. Seeing him as nothing more than a professional finisher, someone who's been through too much, after this heated exchange, Livan prepares to spend time with his daughter. He asks her why her grandfather would throw a party on the same day she was supposed to go out with him. A rhetorical question with an obvious answer. The two go to a diner, where Livan gives Mary a present. When she opens the box, she's surprised to find a framed photo. A picture of her and her mother, taken by Livan years ago. Mary then mentions that her grandfather removed all photos of her mother from the house, to the point where she barely remembered what her mom looked like. On top of that, the child ends up revealing a secret. Mary admits that from time to time, she feels angry at her own mother for leaving them behind. Livan understands and agrees with her feelings. A few hours later, Livan meets with his lawyers. The attorneys inform him that AR's main goal is to reduce Livan's weekly 2-hour visitation with his daughter to just one 90-minute visit every 2 weeks, essentially trying to cut off their contact altogether. To make matters worse, R is hiring top-tier lawyers and using Livan's past to justify this cruel move. He's also bringing up that Livan suffers from PTSD. This leads Livan to open up about his past. He served in the British Special Forces for 22 years, or even goes so far as to accuse Livan of being responsible for his wife's death, a complete lie. In reality, during a mission abroad, Livan's wife took her own life due to severe depression. To make things worse, the lawyers remind Livan that while he does have money to support his daughter, he currently doesn't even have a home. He lives in his car. This, of course, becomes the perfect ammunition for R to claim that Livan is an unfit and dysfunctional father. After that meeting, we see Livan visiting an apartment that looks more like a solitary confinement cell in a prison. But hey, you work with what you've got. Meanwhile, Jenny is out spending time with her best friends, clearly having a great time. The problem is that has been following her the entire night, and he's not alone. Aram is with him, clearly impatient and eager to finish this job once and for all. Later, Jenny ends up at a bar to wrap up the night in style. When she tells the bartender, Johnny, her name, the guy immediately passes the info along while Jenny is helping one of her friends to the bathroom. The criminal and his partner seize the moment and quickly abduct her. The next day, Levin arrives at the construction site but is called into the office by Carla and Joey right away. They reveal that their daughter has been missing for 3 days. She's been kidnapped. The couple is in total despair and end up begging Levin to help them find her. Even though Levin tries to keep his past a secret, his boss knows a veteran when he sees one, especially since his own father was one too. They even offer Levin a generous amount of money to take the case, but the ex-soldier refuses. He insists he's not the man he once was. After that, Levin visits his friend Ghani, who nearly shoots him with an arrow as a reflex. We soon learn that Ghani is also a war veteran who sadly lost his vision while serving. It's clear Levin carries guilt over what happened to him. As the two sit and talk, Levin brings up Jenny's kidnapping. Ghani then asks a simple but pointed question. Is she a good girl? His friend says Jenny is a great person, someone he had promised to protect in the past. Ghani then jokes about how Levin is clearly looking for advice on something he's already decided to do. After that meeting, Levin heads to the Garcia family's home, where Carla leads him to Joey, who is sitting, devastated, in his missing daughter's bedroom. As Levin watches the drunk and broken father, he tries to comfort him, reminding Joey that his family still needs him present. That's when Joey confesses that he's not around them because he's ashamed of having failed to protect his daughter. This brings back memories for Levin of being hated by many people after returning from the Royal Marines. Even though he was seen as dangerous, the Garcias welcomed him and gave him opportunities. That, in Levin's eyes, made them family. Determined, Levin begins his investigation at the bar where Jenny was kidnapped. As he infiltrates the place, he quickly realizes that Johnny, the bartender, has a side hustle, selling cocaine to anyone who comes up to the counter. Levin then moves to the hallway where Jenny was taken and finds a pearl from her necklace on the floor. By the end of the night, we learn that the veterans secretly planted a tracker on the criminal's car. When Johnny arrives home, we see that he's quite health conscious, or at least he tries to be. Using an asthma inhaler to treat his condition, unfortunately for him, Levin is already there, waiting with a shotgun. He quickly subdues Johnny before the man can reach for his pistol. Levin gets straight to the point, showing him a photo of Jenny. Johnny claims he doesn't know anything else about the girl, which forces the contractor to turn to more unconventional methods, if you know what I mean. Levin begins torturing Johnny by dunking his head repeatedly in the bathtub. But before he can finish the interrogation, 2 men suddenly break into the house. As Johnny starts screaming for help, the veteran reacts quickly, using the bartender as a human shield and swiftly taking down the intruders with no effort. With the threat neutralized, Levin prepares to inspect the bodies. That's when he discovers that the 2 dead men were members of the Bratva, one of the names for the Russian mafia. Realizing this, Levin understands he's now tangled in something far more dangerous than he initially expected. After this deadly encounter, the veteran retreats to his makeshift hiding place, the inside of his car. From there, he watches as Danya and Venko, 2 high-ranking assistants of the mafia boss, arrive at Johnny's house. It's revealed that the 2 thugs were originally sent to eliminate Johnny, who had been skimming money from their operation. But they quickly notice something is off. The men weren't killed by a handgun as they expected, but by a shotgun. In other words, someone else was involved in the shootout. Wasting no time, they call in a cleanup crew to sanitize the crime scene. Meanwhile, Levin tracks the vehicle belonging to Ulo, one of the key players in the mafia, and sets up a hideout to observe him. That's when we're introduced to Ulo's wife, Svetlana. She tries to comfort her husband, who is clearly under pressure. But instead of responding with gratitude, the brute shoves her violently. Things escalate quickly, and Svetlana is forced to defend herself with a knife to keep from being assaulted by the thug. Once Svetlana leaves the mansion, Levin makes his move. He breaks in and catches Volo off guard, knocking him out with a single precise blow. When the old man wakes up, he's tied to a chair suspended over a swimming pool by a rope, barely hanging above the water. Levin wastes no time. He has only one subject in mind: Jenny's whereabouts. When questioned, Volo grows enraged and starts shouting in Russian. insulting Jimmy, the man who kidnapped the girl. Apparently, Jimmy disobeyed a direct order and dragged the mafia into something they wanted no part of. Still, Volo claims to know nothing about the girl's location and makes it very clear he doesn't care about her at all. He also questions why Livin would go to war with the Russian mafia over just some random girl. Hearing that, Livin slaps the old man across the face. Once for what he said about Jenny, and again for putting his hands on Svetlana. Then, to finish the job, the veteran lets go of the rope suspending the chair, dropping Volo into the pool, where he begins to drown. After the deed is done, Livin uses his phone to translate what Volo had been yelling in Russian. Through this, he confirms that Volo had been cursing Jimmy, which gives Livin his next lead. Shortly after this, Danya and Venko return to Volo's house, but this time they're joined by Simon, the head of the Russian mafia. The three order their cleanup crew to scrub the entire crime scene. Reviewing security footage, they see exactly who was responsible for Volo's death, Livin, and they realize he was there specifically hunting Jimmy. Simon remarks that while Volo was a respected member of the organization, his son Jimmy is a disgrace. Because of that, he gives the order to hunt down both Livin and Jimmy. The next day, Livin contacts an old friend, now a police officer, and asks him for intel on Jimmy. The cop explains that Jimmy is connected to the highest ranks of the Russian mafia and is one of the largest distributors of blue crystal. You know what that means. The cop then gives Livin the address of a bar that might have more information on Jimmy. However, he also warns the veteran to be cautious about who he's dealing with. Later, Livin finally arrives at the establishment, and immediately he's spotted by Artemis, who observes him through the security cameras. However, she's interrupted by Dog, who teases her about her whereabouts in recent days. Despite Artemis trying to avoid the subject, Doug knows she's involved with the Russians and assures her that their boss will want to know about it. Artemis quickly ends the conversation by showing Livin's image to her partner, expressing her suspicion that he might be a cop. This causes Dog to go see Livin in person. As soon as Livin spots him, he hands over a good amount of money, which convinces the criminal to take him to the boss of the place, Dutch. When Livin comes face to face with Dutch, he makes it clear that he's there to buy more blue crystals and intends to become a regular monthly customer. However, Artemis interrupts their conversation by whispering in Dutch's ear about her suspicion that Livin is a cop. Although Livin doesn't explicitly confirm he's there to negotiate, Dutch insists on having his goons search him. The problem is, Livin doesn't back down, and as the goons close in on him, he starts to take them down one by one. Using whatever he can find as a weapon, he knocks each of Dutch's men out without much trouble. This part is a bit funny because even though a handful of guys are getting knocked out, no one in the room makes a move to draw a weapon and subdue Livin, even though it's clear he's outnumbered. It's a classic action movie convenience, where the protagonist seems to icily handle situations where they would clearly be at a disadvantage. But hey, sometimes you just have to switch off your brain and go with it. Livin finishes off the last goon with a bottle to the neck. Dutch himself interrupts the fight to greet his new customer, and Livin immediately realizes that the man isn't a cop when he feels the calluses on his hands, proving that he's a laborer. However, Dutch notices that Livin is a former soldier, as he can also identify a paratrooper and another soldier when he sees one. As they close the deal, Livin lies about being a distributor of the substance, while Dutch tells him to come to a cafe the next morning to pick up his product. At dawn, Livin arrives and meets Dog and Artemis, with Artemis immediately pointing a gun at the veteran to ensure that he will make the payment. However, the duo doesn't give him the blue crystals, as they still don't trust him. Instead, the criminal gives Livin a phone, saying that he will receive a call telling him where to find his purchase. Upon hearing this, Livin threatens Dog, making it clear that he knows where to find him if he needs to settle any scores. After some time, Dutch calls the veteran, revealing that the crystals are under the passenger seat. The gang leader invites him to meet the true boss of the group the next day. That night, we see Livin continuing his investigation. And the following day, the ex-soldier buys a suit just for the meeting, where he's frisked and taken to meet Dutch and his boss. When they meet, the Russian seems suspicious of Livin and even takes a photo of his ID. But the three of them agree to proceed with the deal. Later, Livin obviously discards the crystals and goes back to investigating the information he has on the case. Upon seeing one of the last photos taken by Jenny, the veteran notices that appeared in the pictures following her. Livin then takes Johnny's phone and flips it upside down, until he finds text exchanges between the bartender and the kidnapper. The veteran discovers that the meeting point for the two is Dutch's bar. So, Levon heads to the establishment. The problem is, Artemis spots him again through the cameras, and immediately, the sly woman signals for reinforcements to betray him. Realizing that the enemies are closing in, the veteran steals a motorcycle and begins to flee from his pursuers. Even in the middle of a gunfight, the ex-soldier manages to handle himself well. The issue arises when he crashes into a police car, and the police come to check who he is. But before the woman can arrest him, Viso and Danya show up, telling her to stay out of it, revealing that they are part of the Russian mafia's crew. Thus, the duo captures him as a prisoner and questions him about his involvement with Jimmy. However, the veteran doesn't flinch and refuses to give any information to the two idiots. Even while tied up, Levin flips the situation and begins to fight back inside the van. Since he's more trained than both of them combined, he easily disarms them and takes control of the situation. In the midst of the chaos, the van's driver is shot, causing the vehicle to flip over. This creates the perfect opportunity for Levon to grab a hammer from the van's toolbox, knock them out, and then finish the two idiots off before pushing the van into the water. Sometime later, we learn that Simon quickly finds the bodies of his men. The grotesque sight shakes even the mafia boss. To deal with this, the old man decides to call a meeting of the Russian Mafia Council. When gathered with the other leaders of the Bratva, Simon explains that they're all being hunted by Levon, who's looking for Jimmy. Upon hearing this, Yuri makes it clear that he will help Simon find Wolo's son and promises to take care of the veteran. To deal with the situation, the mob boss sends Nestor and Karp to handle things. Meanwhile, we return to the captive state of Jenny, where Artemis comes to take her to her computer. She and transport the young girl to a buyer, someone who purchased her simply because she was linked to a painting her father owned. The criminal is about to open the suitcase when he walks over to the two kidnappers, complaining about Jenny biting him. His condition for the deal was that she remain unconscious. Then, we see Anne Artemis going to one of Jimmy's boats. Jimmy is furious about the bite on his face, which required more than 20 stitches. The Russian reveals that this injury cost him dearly. To make up for the damage, the boss orders his subordinates to finish off Jenny to appease their disappointed client. Soon after, Simon and his two henchmen arrive at Jimmy's base, causing terror among everyone. At this moment, Nestor steps forward, punching Jimmy before he can react. Simon sits next to the criminal to explain that his father, along with Denania and Venko, were killed by a man who's now hunting them. Simon then shows a photo of Levon, which Jimmy immediately recognizes. The Russian reveals the veteran's identity, allowing them to track down all possible information on him. As a result, Nestor and Karp catch an unexpected R in the middle of his workout. Meanwhile, Levin receives a call from the school, informing him that his daughter has not been picked up yet. The ex-soldier grabs Mercy, joking about the fact that her father took care of her grandfather. He also sent multiple messages to the old man but received no reply. At this point, Levon feels he has no choice but to confess to Mercy that he's involved with dangerous people who might have done something to her grandfather. Surprisingly, Mercy is not scared. Upon arriving at her grandfather's house, they discover that the property is completely ablaze. Levon quickly enters the house and manages to save the old man, who is fortunately still alive. The old man immediately realizes that the Russians came after him because of the veteran, and Levon has no answer to the old man's criticism. After all, his involvement in Jenny's case is what caused all of this. However, Rufiel thanks him for saving him, and then Levin reminds his daughter about Gan because the veteran decides to take her to his old partner's house to keep her safe. Once there, the two discuss the critical situation, and Levon makes it clear that he will handle this with Jimmy personally. Upon hearing this, Gan presents his friend with a special menu of heavy firearms, because he will definitely need the heaviest possible weapons to act. Meanwhile, Artemis and are transporting Jenny to the hideout to finish her off once and for all. However, when the girl starts praying for her life, the idiot Artemis tries to stop her, and by threatening her, the girl starts to struggle, which distracts Artemis and causes the car to crash into a tree. This ends up being the perfect opportunity for Jenny to run off into the dark forest, and the two idiots panic because if she speaks, they will end up back in prison. Jenny manages to make it to the road, where she is approached by a police car. The problem is that the officer who helps her is one of the Russian subordinates, and the corrupt cop puts Jenny in the car. After the whole journey, the poor girl is surprised again by her two kidnappers, who mock her escape attempt. In this way, the duo throws her into the mud and prepares to finish her off without mercy. Just then, the old man calls asking if Jenny is still alive. When the criminal confirms the information, the abuser orders that they bring her back to him alive and dirty, so that the disgusting man can have a second night with her. To not lose the client, the couple transports Jenny to the old man's private party. When they arrive there, Jenny plays the piano and is then prepared to be cruelly tortured by the man who is called by Artemis to start the session. Upon seeing her, the magnate comments that he has nothing against her and that his only desire now is to literally watch her from the inside. However, just before the poor girl is finished off, an explosion is heard inside the mansion. Meanwhile, we see Jim waiting for the next orders from the Russian mafia, while indulging in some plim powder. What he didn't expect, though, was that Levon was invading his nightclub and quietly taking down each of his security guards. However, Levon ends up being noticed, but that's not a problem, since numerical advantage means nothing to someone with his skills. The veteran takes down each of the henchmen with ease, leaving only Jimmy, who grabs one of his women as a hostage, forcing the ex-soldier to shoot the Russian's hand, causing him to release her immediately. Once disarmed, Levin finally faces Jimmy, who questions why the man is waging a war to save some random girl. But it's clear that he will never understand the motivation behind the ex-soldier's mission, who interrogates him about Jenny's whereabouts. In this way, to make sure he doesn't get the wrong address, Levin takes the blonde to the location of the girl, which is the mansion where the poor girl is about to be tortured. Upon arriving there, Jimmy explains that takes pictures of girls at clubs so that he can send the photos to his clients, who choose the prettiest ones, and then they are kidnapped and sold. The Russian also questions the ex-soldier's motivations one last time, to which Levin responds with a simple question: "What if you had a daughter?" Since the idiot denies it, Levin makes it clear that this is why he cannot understand the meaning behind his actions. Then the businessman finishes the job by kicking and shooting multiple bullets into the idiot's chest, who in the end gets exactly what he deserved. Now, Levon prepares for the final stretch of his mission and begins the invasion, eliminating sentinels that are guarding the perimeter from above. He then sneaks in and takes down two more of the old man's henchmen. As he enters the residence, we discover that the explosion that scares Artemis and the bald guy is caused by a grenade thrown by Levon. After it explodes, he barges into the ballroom and executes as many enemies as possible who can't keep up with the veteran's tactics. Meanwhile, Dutch finally discovers the truth about Levon and the fact that he sent several Russians to the grave. To prevent this from reflecting poorly on him, the motorcyclist calls his entire gang to attack not only his fake client, but also everyone involved in this war. Shortly after, Dutch's men begin invading the house, forcing Levon to deal not only with the magnate's henchmen, but also with the bikers. Eventually, Dog appears personally to face him. He struggles to try and stab Levon, but he's no match for the veteran, who quickly finishes him off. After this fight, his next opponent is Dutch, who, although not as skilled as Levon, manages to compensate with physical strength, allowing him to counterattack. To settle this once and for all, the two ex-military men face off with blades until the veteran overpowers the motorcyclist, who, even in his defeat, still respects Levon. After the massacre, Levon reaches the room where Jenny is, firing a shot that throws the old man back several meters. Before saving her, Levon is almost hit by gunfire from the couple. However, Levon manages to close the distance and begins to beat who has no chance of fighting back. This idiot only dares to act tough against young and unsuspecting women. As Levon finishes off, Jenny manages to catch Artemis off guard with kicks and ends up suffocating her with her legs. After winning, the ex-soldier frees her, and outside, we see Karp, Nestor, and Simon arriving. The duo simply opens fire on the corrupt cop's car, which had approached to understand what was happening at the mansion. When the duo enters, they almost manage to finish off Levon and Jenny. However, the ex-soldier activates a camera on his rifle, which connects via Bluetooth to a screen on his vest, allowing Levon to take out Karp without even seeing him directly. He then finishes Nestor off with a grenade. Once the cleanup is done, the veteran leaves his weapon behind and escapes with Jenny. Thus, the only one left alive is Simon, who who reports to his mafia associate about the disaster. But the guy acknowledges that Levon was there only for the girl, and since he already got what he wanted, the mafiosos will leave him alone. However, this doesn't satisfy Simon, who wants revenge on Levon. When he makes this clear, he ends up being threatened by his own partner. At dawn, Levon finally drops Jenny off at her house, and everyone is very happy to see her safe. In the end, the exhausted ex-soldier goes to Ganny's house to see Mary again, and there he feels like part of a family once more.